What's up guys, Lvladen here, and today I'm coming at you with a video on my Ret Paladin. I'm going to play a couple of twos games in the background while I talk about the state of Ret and a couple of the changes that I'd like to see to the spec in PvP. So let's talk about it. For starters, I think Ret is really not terrible right now. It's not the worst, but it's also not the best. And due to a number of things, kind of since they did the gearing changes in Dragonflight, unless you are near the top of the specializations, you aren't going to see too much play in the PvP meta. And I do realize as of late that unless you're like really good at a specialization that's not meta, you are not going to have a good time in PvP. So let's talk about some of the things that I think would be helpful for Ret in both, a casual standpoint and also a rated arena standpoint. The first thing I'd like to talk about is single target pressure and I guess Ret's identity as a burst specialization. So throughout most of the history of Ret, it really hasn't had super high consistent damage until probably Shadowlands. Shadowlands was the first expansion where they started to shift Ret from purely burst oriented into a actually in Shadowlands it had high burst and it had high sustain, but that was the shift when they started having Ret have high sustained damage. And right now in PvP I think Ret does have pretty high sustained damage, but due to the way the meta works right now with very, very high burst damage, it's not really a sustained playstyle. And even in those sustained games, Ret doesn't have a mortal strike, so if you go into dampening in a 2v2, you're immediately at a disadvantage against classes with true mortal strikes and even classes with not true mortal strikes like Unholy Death Knights and Feral Druids. I think Feral Druids isn't quite 25% like a regular mortal strike, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. I could be totally wrong and it could be the equivalent of a regular mortal strike, but I'm not entirely sure. But either way, Ret lacks a mortal strike, and I really don't think Blizzard is going to give it a mortal strike for whatever reason. Honestly, like if they wanted to give Enhance and Ret a mortal strike, they probably would have done it several expansions ago. So the thing that I think we should really start focusing on is adding back some of that single target burst pressure. I just finished gearing up an Arms Warrior, and from what I've been told, Arms Warrior is not that great of a spec right now. However, when I played Arms, I immediately noticed that when I push my cooldowns and I push my buttons, people's health bar, they actually move. Like you can get a 1 million fairly common execute crit, you can get 1 million mortal strikes, and your cooldowns actually do something. Like if you go in there, you Colossus Smash, Avatar Thunderous Roar, into double overpower sharpen, that mortal strike, that sharpen is actually going to move someone's HP bar. Whereas if you judgment into a final reckoning, Wake of Ashes, double final verdict, your first final verdict is probably going to do about 350k damage to 450k damage, and then the second one at the 7 stack will do maybe about 500k damage. And by then, you're ramping up your damage, but then the enemies have time to push their defensives. So you're really not a bursty specialization. And even if we went over and started playing Templar, there are a number of reasons that Templar is not ideal for what its intended purpose is, which is bursting, and its self-sustain is much lower because of a lack of Eternal Flame. But also its Empyrean Hammer, its Shake the Heavens Empyrean Hammers, those are very RNG based. They don't always hit the target that you want them to hit. They can hit pets. So you take a hit in your sustained damage to just buff your single target burst a little bit. And if you're out there playing an Arms Warrior and you get like 2 to 3, maybe 4 different abilities that can hit for 800 to 1 million, like if you reset an Overpower and you get that Overpower Tactician crit, that's 1 million. So I'm not saying Arms Warrior is good either. I think Arms Warrior is like probably B tier. It's one of the not popular good melees right now. Like Fury is way better, but I'm just saying like from my personal experience, I have leveled an enhanced shaman, a Ret Paladin, and an arms warrior to level 80 right now. So this is my point of view. So the single target damage, I think they should increase it. And the 3 ways that I would do that would be: 1, add like 15% onto Final Verdict. Final Verdict used to do more damage than Immortal Strike and more damage than a Death Coil. But now it does less damage, significantly less damage than both. Maybe not quite Death Coil, maybe just like a little bit less than a Death Coil, but back in Dragonflight and Shadowlands, if you were to compare those abilities, Final Verdict would do equal to, if not higher than most Mortal Strikes, depending on the build that you were running. But now, I guess, because we have a lot of damage over time effects, we have shied away from having strong single target pressure, which does not go well with the class. We don't have a Mortal Strike. It does not go well with the class. We need the strong single target burst back. The next way that I would unnerf the single target would be starting to remove the PvP modifiers on all of our offensive cooldowns. So Final Reckoning, I understand if they don't want to unnerf wings. I personally am in a huge favor of unnerfing wings, but if for whatever reason Blizzard doesn't want to give wings its power back, which, by the way, wings is very weak cooldown right now, then maybe they can start by unnerfing Final Reckoning in PvP combat, because currently it really doesn't feel like anything. Even when you pair up a Crusade in your Final Reckoning and a Judgment and a stack of Seal of Order, you stack up all your modifiers, your highest Final Verdict is going to be like 650k to 700k, which for the amount of modifiers that you're stacking onto one spell, it's very, very low. It's very low. So I would consider unnerfing some of the modifiers. Final Reckoning, that'd be great. Unnerfing Crusade or Avenging Wrath Might, either one. I would love to go back to Avenging Wrath Might, but a 10% damage increase is laughable. It's pretty much nothing. You get more of a damage increase out of throwing a Judgment on a target than you would from popping wings. So Avenging Wrath Might, pretty garbage right now. Outside of that, I feel like Ret's damage is decent. It just doesn't have the style of damage that typically nets kills in PvP. After that, I think that the self-healing is okay. It's not great. It's just barely okay. Oftentimes you'll find yourself out-healed by Death Knights, mages. Hunters actually are a huge self-heal offender right now. They have a ton of self-healing. Feral Druids have a ton of self-healing. So, it's not OP, but if you spam a couple of Eternal Flames while kiting, it's better than it was in Dragonflight. So, not the best. But we do have healing buffs coming in the next patch. We just don't have them right now. After that, I would really encourage another look at Divine Protection, because a 1 minute cooldown, 10% damage reduction in PvP combat is awful. So right now, guys, if you don't know, Divine Protection has a PvP modifier on it. It was actually just peeled back for Holy, and I have no idea why it was not peeled back for Ret as well, because a 10% wall will not save you. Even a 20% wall generally doesn't save you from using a CD. So I really think they need to undo the nerf on Divine Protection in PvP combat. All right. I think that's about it for the changes that I want to see, at least in the short term. I want to see a 15%, in the range of around 15% damage increase on Final Verdict. Definitely unnerf Final Reckoning in PvP combat. Maybe Execution Sentence 2. Maybe these can do something in PvP again, because right now they don't do anything in PvP combat. After that, just undo the nerf, or peel it back a little bit. Maybe like make Avenging Wrath Might 15% and Crusade like 25%. I don't know, but we had years and years and years of regular unnerfed wings, and then one day it was just like, nope, we're gonna kill this cooldown in PvP, which sucked. I really hated that. Actually, you know what? Never mind. This is my number one change. Buff wings, man. Unnerf wings, buff wings, whatever you want to call it. I want my wings back. Wings are the highlight of playing a Ret Paladin. Bring this back. And then obviously the Divine Protection change. All right, guys, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like, subscribe, comment, follow me on Twitch, Twitter, and in the near future, I will be going onto the PTR and reviewing the ret changes. They did just give an overall, I think, 6% damage buff on the PTR, but I really, I can't feel it that much. And instead of buffing everything flat out, I really just want them to buff, give a chunky buff to Final Verdict. Make our Final Verdict feel worth pushing again. All right, that's it for me. Peace.